Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we head into our final segment of the day. Been doing all kinds of basketball, but I do want to touch on some MLB as there's been a lot of noise as of late surrounding the injuries to starting pitchers. We've seen a handful of big-time names that have gone down on the injured list that has caused a lot of conversations surrounding the current state of the MLB and their pitchers. In the past week, we saw Spencer Strider of the Braves and Shane Bieber of the Guardians, and Yuri Perez as well. He may have been 2 weeks ago, but these big-time name pitchers go down with season-ending injuries. Strider, it isn't officially confirmed just yet, but it is a situation where it's a real concern with his UCL, so not looking great. We'll definitely keep you updated on whether or not he's going to require Tommy John surgery, but we already know that Bieber is going to be out for the rest of the season, and you know, this goes along to a list of a handful of other stars that are currently out. You have Justin Verlander, Clayton Kershaw, Shohei Ohtani, Garrett Cole, all of these players dealing with arm injuries as well. A little bit more minor, but as your resident Red Sox fan, we have Nick Pivetta, who just went down, placed on the injured list as well with an elbow injury. But again, a lot of theorizing as to why this is happening, especially in the uptick in the past couple years. Let me see if I actually did save the tweet, because I did find a very interesting note on the history of Tommy John surgeries, where it was Dan Clark of @DanClarkSports on Twitter said, at the current pace there will be, and keep in mind this is a little bit subjective here, can't imagine that injuries necessarily pace out like this during the season, but still for a certain measuring stick, you could say, there at the current pace there will be 52 MLB players undergoing Tommy John surgery in 2024. There were 31 in 2023. In the 10 years prior to the pitch clock being implemented, there were 254, averaging 25 per year. Now, again, I do think that you can't necessarily project injuries over the course of a season like that, but he does make an interesting point about how we've seen an increase of injuries, and not just injuries, but of season-ending Tommy John surgeries in recent years. He specifically looked at the pitch clock, which he's definitely not alone on theorizing that it has to do with the pitch clock. A lot of people are making that argument as well. There was even a member of the MLB Players Association, the chief of that, Tony Clark. He spoke out and attributed the recent spike in injuries to, at least partly, to the reduced recovery time and the pitch clock, which does make some sense if you are doing any type of explosive movement, exercise, anything along those lines, that having less time to recover does make sense that it is going to wear on a person fatigue-wise and make an impact in that sense. So I'm definitely not discrediting that. Do I think it's the number one reason? I don't personally. I feel like there are some bigger things at play, but again, I also don't think, that being said, and I'm going to get into those other things as well, but I do think that this entire situation is due to a variety of different reasons, not just one in particular, which would be nice if there was just one solution, but I think that it stems even into the development of how we have the youth trying to pitch here, where everybody is so fixated on the idea of velocity and spin rate along those lines, which are definitely important numbers in terms, especially in the analytics community, but velocity just simply makes sense. Of course, you throw a faster pitch, a lot of the time it's harder to hit for an individual MLB player or a baseball player in general, stemming down to the youth age. And that's something that Dr. James Andrews, who is a surgeon that is most famous for his work with Tommy John surgeries, he said that he's been studying the trends surrounding Tommy John surgery and what is playing into that. And he said that there's been a major increase in the surgeries at the youth level, which is definitely concerning. His theory is that it is due to the velocity and spin obsession that is in the current culture. He said that studying the specific muscle groups and tendons, I'm no doctor, so I'm definitely apologizing ahead of time for the mispronunciation, but the ulnar collateral ligament, also known as sort of the Tommy John tendon or ligament, it doesn't fully develop until humans are at age 26, and we have 13, 14-year-old baseball players coming up. The idea is trying to have them pitch as fast as possible and spin the ball as much as possible and hit these types of benchmarks to help get them recruited to a higher level. And at the college level, it's almost sort of having a rental of these players for just a couple years, where, knock on wood, we haven't seen any major injuries yet, but you had Paul Skeens at LSU last year, pitching, full games, 100 plus pitches, just like half the times that he went out there, and just sort of going all out, which is awesome to see. But as humans, we weren't physically designed to be throwing this ball at 100 miles per hour, 90 times in the span of a couple hours. And it's dangerous, and there's a reason why we've seen so many injuries. Now, again, even with that, I don't think that is the sole reason, but it's a massive part of it. There are other factors that play into it, but again, pitching is this developmental thing, and over time, just the wear and tear on these pitchers' arms. I mean, sort of cross-sport comparison here, but you look at the NFL and the deteriorating value of running backs in the league. It's because of this idea of, well, they have all of these carries and touches from, Pop Warner football to high school to college, that they just get worn out by the time they finish their first NFL rookie contract. And, if that's the case with just running and getting hit, what about this one particular ligament that is time after time again being pushed to the limits in an excruciating way? And, it's just interesting to see sort of how we're going to go about this, because I don't think it's possible to necessarily correct that if that is the number one issue of finding a way to change the entire structure of how colleges and the MLB look at these things that frankly are important once you get to the MLB. But, to what level? Probably going to have to find ways to cut back in certain instances as well that can make a difference. But the sort of last factor I do want to point to as well is the idea of the sticky stuff and having substances to help grip, where we've seen, Spider Tack became a massive story in the MLB a couple years ago. That sort of shook the way that the MLB as a whole has treated pitching. And you had people sort of pointing at MLB players saying that they were just dramatic and they wanted everything easy, and that's why there was a section of pitchers that were saying maybe not Spider Tack, but talking about sunscreen or, some of those other less significant substances that helped pitchers grip the ball. And, Tyler Glasnow, one of the best pitchers in the MLB, but somebody who has dealt with tons of injuries in recent years, he had a press conference a couple years ago when he was still with the Rays, and he talked about the idea of, as this was all coming out, he pitched his first game totally dry. He used some combination of sunscreen and something else leading up to that point in his career, and he went out, pitched against the Nationals, had a solid outing, but then afterwards said he was feeling pain and muscles in his arm that he didn't even know he had, and he ended up missing out on the rest of the season because of it. And I do think that there's a fair point there. There's things that, pitching again, and I know there's going to be the older fans who are saying, oh, well, back in the day, there weren't all these different rules to sort of coddle MLB pitchers. The way that Glasnow put it too, and listen, I have no further information on this necessarily, but Glasnow said your favorite pitcher 50 years ago probably used some sort of substance as well, not illegal necessarily, but just something to help grip the ball, not something that will enhance your ability to put spin on the ball or anything along those lines. But the way that he sort of further described it was the fact that he had the substance to make it so that he can put less pressure on his grip and himself, and once that was outlawed, he was having to sort of choke the ball harder, was engaging more of the muscles in his forearm, in his elbow, and it just changed the motion of the entire thing. And I feel like if we're seeing all these injuries, I understand that once you allow some substances, it becomes a slippery slope of how do you catch people using illegal substances. But I'm just putting all of this out there because specifically those are the two main things that I look at in terms of the idea of having a more regulated grip and trying to find a way to at least put less pressure on arms coming up. Again, that one seems like an incredibly difficult fix to sort of work out in the long term, but is probably the most significant of all of these factors. The pitch clock, again, definitely doesn't help necessarily, but I am also a fan of the pitch clock as well. I'd prefer to see it if it is causing legitimate injuries like the MLB Players Association does think. The MLB themselves sort of denied the direct link but said they were going to look into it more. They cited some type of research from Johns Hopkins University as to why the pitch clock is not the number one cause for these increase in injuries. But let me know what you think, because I don't believe that there is one right answer to this problem, but there is a legitimate problem that we should be looking to amend. Just a matter of how are we, and I say we as I have zero control myself, how is the MLB and even beyond the MLB college programs and youth development coaches, how are they going to sort of fix the issue at hand here, because it is definitely becoming a bit detrimental to the league itself, and we all want to see the best players out there on the mound, but unfortunately there have been some obstacles in the way. But that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Feel free to check out these videos as well as all of the other videos from my other great co-hosts here at the GSMC Sports Network on YouTube and on socials. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. We will be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock, so we will see you then. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.